The sound of the cane hitting the marble table was louder than a gunshot. Isabella felt it in her chest, a sharp crack that rattled the champagne flutes on her tray and sent a shock wave of silence through the Golden Palace ballroom. 200 people dressed in designer gowns and tuxedos that cost more than her entire year's rent stopped mid-conversation. The string quartet's violins squeaked into stillness. Even the air seemed to freeze. She stood at the edge of the room, her white server's uniform starched so stiff it chafed her collarbones, and watched as Don Salvatore Moretti rose from his seat like a storm cloud taking human form. He was 73 years old. His spine was curved like a question mark. His hands, gnarled and spotted with age, trembled as they gripped the silver wolf's head of his cane. But when he opened his mouth and began to scream, there was nothing frail about him. The words came out in rapid-fire Italian, harsh and guttural, spit flying from his lips. A young waiter, maybe 19, with terror written across his acne-scarred face, stood frozen in front of the Don, a wine stain spreading across the old man's white dinner jacket like blood. Isabella couldn't look away. The Don's voice crescendoed, echoing off the vaulted ceilings painted with cherubs and gold leaf. He slammed his cane down again. The rhythm of it was primal, tribal, designed to humiliate. Around the ballroom, men in expensive suits watched with carefully blank faces. Women hid smiles behind their hands. The waitstaff, Isabella's co-workers, pressed themselves against the walls, making themselves as small as possible. She knew that strategy. Invisibility was survival, but something about this moment felt different, wrong. The Don's voice cracked as he screamed, and Isabella realized with a cold shock of recognition that he wasn't just angry, he was slipping. His words were becoming tangled, confused. He repeated himself. He gestured wildly, nearly losing his balance. This wasn't power. This was an old man having a breakdown in front of an audience that would never let him forget it. And no one was stopping him. Isabella's eyes tracked across the room to the high table where the real power sat. She'd been briefed by the catering manager before the shift. Don't look at table one, don't speak to table one, don't even breathe near table one. Table one was where Lorenzo Moretti held court. She'd never seen him in person before tonight, but everyone in New York knew his face. The tabloids called him the gentleman killer. Forbes called him a shipping magnate. The FBI called him untouchable. He sat perfectly still, a crystal tumbler of amber liquid in his hand, watching his father with the kind of empty expression that made Isabella's stomach turn. His suit was black, perfectly tailored, the kind that whispered obscene wealth. His dark hair was swept back from a face that could have been carved from Carrara marble, all sharp angles and brutal beauty. His eyes were the color of espresso, so dark they looked black in the candlelight, and those eyes were watching his father destroy himself in front of 200 witnesses. Lorenzo lifted his glass and took a slow sip. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The Don was still screaming. The young waiter was crying now, tears streaming down his face, his lips moving in what might have been prayers or apologies. The stain on the Don's jacket was just wine, an accident. It could have happened to anyone. But this wasn't about wine. Isabella knew that. She'd grown up in a world where everything was a test, where every interaction was about dominance and submission, where mercy was weakness and weakness was death. Her fingers tightened on the champagne tray until they went numb. She thought of her grandmother's voice, rough as sandpaper, speaking words in a dialect that predated modern Italian by centuries. Old Sicilian, the language of the mountains and the blood feuds and the ancient codes that governed life before governments, before laws, before mercy. A peasant screams to be heard, a king whispers to be obeyed. The words rose in her throat like vomit. Don't. She was nobody, a ghost. A girl in a white uniform serving champagne to people who would never see her face. She had $847 in her bank account. She lived in a studio apartment in Queens with water damage and a radiator that screamed all winter. She was invisible by design, by necessity, by survival. But her grandmother's voice wouldn't stop. You are the last of us. You carry the old blood. You speak with the tongue of our ancestors. The Don's cane came down again, and the young waiter flinched so hard he stumbled backward. Isabella's feet moved before her brain could stop them. She set down her tray on an empty table. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. Everything else in her body was screaming at her to run, to hide, to disappear, but her hands were perfectly, calm as she walked across the ballroom floor. The marble was so polished she could see her reflection in it. A small woman with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, pale skin, and eyes the color of sea glass. 23 years old, invisible until now. She walked past tables full of New York's elite, past men who ran hedge funds and controlled shipping lanes and owned politicians, past women dripping in diamonds that could feed families for years. They watched her with the idle curiosity of people watching a car crash in slow motion. She stopped 3 feet from Don Salvatore Moretti. Up close, she could smell him. Expensive cologne failing to mask the scent of old age, medication, and something deeper. Something like rot. His eyes, when they finally snapped to her face, were rheumy and red-rimmed, but there was still intelligence there, still danger. He switched to English. "Who the fuck are you?" His accent was thick, the vowels rounded and drawn out. Brooklyn by way of Palermo. Isabella's heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her teeth, but when she opened her mouth, her voice came out clear and strong, and she spoke in Old Sicilian. "Un parinu abbaio e grida, un re parla sutta voce e tutti ascoltano." A peasant barks and screams. A king speaks quietly and everyone listens. The effect was instantaneous. Don Salvatore's mouth fell open. The color drained from his already pale face, leaving him the gray-white of a corpse. His cane slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor. Around the room, men in dark suits stood up, hands moved inside jackets. The distinctive sound of safeties clicking off filled the silence. Isabella knew she should be terrified. She was terrified. But she couldn't stop now. She took a step closer, and her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Stai facendo vergogna all'antichi. Tu parli come un cane ferito, ma tu figlio ti guarda e vedi solo debolezza." You are shaming the ancestors. You speak like a wounded dog, but your son watches and sees only weakness. The Don's eyes filled with tears, and Isabella made the mistake of looking to her left toward table 1. Lorenzo Moretti was standing now. He moved like smoke, like something that existed between seconds. One moment he was seated, the next he was walking toward her with the kind of predatory grace that made every primitive instinct in her body scream at her to run. He was taller than she'd expected. 6'3", maybe 6'4", broad shoulders that tapered to a narrow waist, hands that looked like they could break her wrist with a casual twist, and his face, God, his face was absolutely empty of expression. A mask, a void. He stopped beside his father and looked down at Isabella with those black eyes. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, the kind of quiet that was more terrifying than any scream. "Who taught you to speak that dialect?" Isabella's mouth was dry. She could feel the guns pointed at her back, at her head, at her chest. She could feel the weight of 200 pairs of eyes. She could smell the fear coming off the young waiter, the expensive perfume of the women at the nearby tables, the gun oil and testosterone radiating from the men with their hands inside their jackets. "My grandmother," she whispered. "Your grandmother's name." It wasn't a question. Isabella swallowed. "Lucia Constantino." Something flickered across Lorenzo's face. Not emotion, he was too controlled for that, but something. Recognition, maybe, or danger. He reached out and every muscle in Isabella's body locked, but he didn't touch her. Instead, he picked up his father's cane from the floor and handed it back to the old man with a tenderness that felt obscene. "Papa," he said softly in English, "go to the car." Don Salvatore was still staring at Isabella like she was a ghost. His lips trembled. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse. "She sounds like my mother, like home, like Corleone before the war." "I know." Lorenzo's hand settled on his father's shoulder. "Go to the car. I'll handle this." The old man let himself be led away by 2 bodyguards who materialized from the shadows. Isabella watched him go, watched the way his legs shook, the way he leaned heavily on the cane and felt a sharp twist of guilt. Then Lorenzo turned back to her and the guilt evaporated under the ice of his stare. "You're coming with me. I have a shift. You just insulted a Don in front of 200 witnesses. You don't have a shift. You don't have a job. You barely have a life." He tilted his head. "Unless you can explain to me very quickly why I shouldn't assume you're a spy, sent to humiliate my father." Isabella's blood turned to ice water. "I'm not a spy." "Then you're stupid. I'm not sure which is worse." He held out his hand. "Phone." "What?" "Your phone. Give it to me." She thought about running. The exit was 40 feet away. She could probably make it 15 feet before the bullets hit. She pulled her phone from the pocket of her uniform and handed it to him. Lorenzo passed it to a man who'd appeared at his shoulder, another bodyguard. This one with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. Then Lorenzo's hand, warm, calloused, unexpectedly gentle, wrapped around her upper arm. "Walk," he said quietly. "Don't make a scene. Don't make a scene." As if she hadn't just committed social suicide in front of New York's most dangerous family. But she walked. But here's what Isabella didn't know yet. What she couldn't have known as Lorenzo Moretti led her out of the ballroom and into the cold November night. She hadn't just insulted a mafia boss. She'd spoken a dialect that was supposed to be dead, a code that was only taught to blood family, to heirs. If you think Isabella just signed her death warrant, hit that like button right now. But if you think she just became the most powerful woman in that room without even knowing it, drop a queen in the comments, because what happens next is going to change everything. The car was a black Mercedes that probably cost more than Isabella would earn in 5 years. Lorenzo guided her into the back seat with a hand on her head, the gesture almost protective, like a cop helping a suspect into a cruiser. Except she wasn't being protected. The door closed with a heavy thunk that sounded like a coffin lid. Lorenzo slid in beside her, and suddenly the spacious back seat felt suffocating. He smelled like expensive cologne, something with notes of cedar and smoke, and underneath it, something sharper, adrenaline, maybe, or danger. The car started moving. Isabella stared out the window, watching the glittering lights of Manhattan slide past. She tried to memorize the route. They were heading north, uptown, away from the crowds and the witnesses. "Where are we going?" Her voice sounded small. "Somewhere we can talk." "I can talk here." "No." Lorenzo's eyes were fixed on her face, studying her, with the intensity of a scientist examining a specimen. "You can't, because you're terrified, which means you'll either lie or say nothing at all. I need you scared enough to be honest, but safe enough to speak. It's a delicate balance." Isabella's hands were shaking. She pressed them together in her lap, trying to hide it. Lorenzo noticed anyway. He noticed everything. "Tell me about your grandmother," he said. "She died 6 months ago." "I'm sorry." The words sounded genuine, which somehow made everything worse. Isabella's eyes burned. "Are you going to kill me? I mean, I haven't decided yet." The casual honesty of it punched the air from her lungs. Lorenzo leaned back against the leather seat, his long legs stretched out, his posture relaxed. But Isabella could see the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers drummed once, twice against his thigh before going still. "That dialect you spoke," he said. "Old Sicilian. Corleone dialect specifically. It's not written down. It's not taught in schools. The only people who speak it are old men from the mountains, and most of them are dead." His eyes found hers. "So I'll ask you again, who taught you?" "I told you. My grandmother. Lucia Constantino." He said the name slowly, tasting it. "And who taught her?" "Her mother, and her mother before that." Isabella's throat was tight. "It's passed down through the women. That's what my grandmother said. The men go to war, they die, they forget. But the women remember." Something dark flickered in Lorenzo's expression. "What else did your grandmother teach you?" "Cooking, sewing, how to be invisible." Clearly that last lesson didn't take. Despite everything, Isabella almost laughed. The sound came out strangled. The car turned, and suddenly they were pulling into an underground garage. The lights were fluorescent and harsh, reflecting off rows of expensive vehicles. The Mercedes stopped in front of a private elevator with mirrored doors. Lorenzo got out and held the door for her. Isabella didn't move. "I can have Antonio drag you out," Lorenzo said calmly. "But I'd rather not. You've had a difficult night." "You're kidnapping me. I'm protecting you." "From what?" "From the consequences of your own actions." He leaned down, bringing his face level with hers, this close that she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "You embarrassed my father in front of the 5 families. You spoke words that only blood should know. By morning, every organization from here to Chicago will want to know who you are and who sent you." His voice dropped. "The Russians especially. They've been looking for a weakness in my family for 3 years. You just gift-wrapped yourself and put a bow on top." Isabella's chest felt tight. "I was trying to help, I know." Something that might have been respect crossed his face. "That's the only reason you're still breathing. Now get out of the car." She got out. The elevator ride was silent except for the hum of machinery and Isabella's pulse thundering in her ears. Lorenzo stood on the opposite side of the small space, his hands in his pockets, watching the floor numbers climb. 32, 33, 34. The elevator didn't stop until 42, the penthouse. The doors opened directly into an apartment that looked like something from a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park, the trees bare and skeletal in the November night. The floors were dark hardwood, the furniture a mix of modern and antique that probably required an interior designer with a PhD. Everything was clean, sharp, expensive, and there were men everywhere. They stood at the windows, sat on the couches, leaned against the walls, all of them armed, all of them watching her with the flat, assessing eyes of predators. Isabella's survival instinct screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to go. The elevator had already closed behind her. Lorenzo shrugged out of his suit jacket and draped it over a chair. He rolled up his sleeves, exposing forearms corded with muscle and crossed with scars. Then he gestured to a chair positioned in the middle of the room. "Sit." It felt like a trap, but everything felt like a trap now. Isabella sat. Lorenzo pulled up a chair and positioned it directly in front of her, so close their knees almost touched. He sat down, leaned forward, and rested his elbows on his thighs. "Tell me everything," he said. "Start with your full name." "Isabella Constantino. Age, 23. Where were you born?" "Queens. Astoria." "Father's name?" Isabella's breath caught. This was the question, the one that would either save her or kill her. "I don't know," she whispered. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. "You don't know your father's name?" "My grandmother never told me. She said he was dead, that he died before I was born." "Your mother?" "Died in childbirth. It was just me and my grandmother." Lorenzo sat back, his jaw tight. He exchanged a look with one of the men by the window, older, gray-haired, with the bearing of a soldier. "Luca," Lorenzo said. "Pull records, Lucia Constantino. Died 6 months ago. Find her address, her employment history, everything." The gray-haired man nodded and pulled out a phone. Lorenzo's attention returned to Isabella. "Why did you speak to my father?" "Because he was humiliating himself." The words came out sharper than she intended. "Because everyone in that room was enjoying it, and it was wrong." "Wrong." Lorenzo's lips twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You stopped a public humiliation with another public humiliation. Do you see the irony? I spoke words only he could understand. That was the point." "And where did you learn those specific words?" "A peasant barks and screams. A king speaks quietly." "That's not a common saying. My grandmother used to say it when I got upset, when I raised my voice." Isabella's hands were clenched so tight her nails bit into her palms. "She said a woman's power is in her stillness, her silence, that the world wants us to scream so they can call us hysterical." Something shifted in Lorenzo's expression, not softening, he seemed incapable of that, but a new kind of attention. "Your grandmother was right," he said quietly. The man named Luca returned, phone in hand. "Boss, we have a problem." Lorenzo stood and Isabella's stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "Lucia Constantino's address is flagged in the system, black flag, archives." The room went very, very still. Lorenzo's voice was soft, deadly. "Whose archives?" "Ours." Isabella didn't understand what was happening, but she understood the temperature in the room. The way every man's hand moved closer to their weapon, the way Lorenzo's shoulders went rigid. "Show me," Lorenzo said. Luca handed over the phone. Lorenzo looked at the screen and Isabella watched his face carefully. She'd gotten good at reading people. It was a survival skill when you grew up with nothing, but Lorenzo was a locked vault. Then his eyes cut to her and she saw something she didn't expect. Fear, not of her, for her. "Get my father on the phone," Lorenzo said. "Now." 20 minutes later, Don Salvatore Moretti sat in a chair across from Isabella, his hands wrapped around a cup of espresso that he wasn't drinking. He'd changed out of his wine-stained jacket into a cardigan that made him look like someone's grandfather. But his eyes, sharp and clear now, were fixed on Isabella's face with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Lucia Constantino," he said finally, his voice rough. "I knew that name once, a long time ago." Lorenzo stood behind his father, his arms crossed. "Papa, we need to know." "Quiet, boy." The Don didn't look away from Isabella. "You have her eyes, green like sea glass, and her mouth, stubborn." His hand trembled as he set down the espresso cup. "Lucia was a good girl, smart, too smart for her own good. She asked questions, wanted to understand the old ways, the old words." He paused. "There was a man, Marco the librarian, we called him, because he remembered everything, every story, every feud, every oath. Lucia was his student." Isabella's heart was pounding. "I don't know anyone named Marco." "No, you wouldn't." The Don's expression turned bitter. "Because 30 years ago, Marco was accused of being a traitor, of selling family secrets to the Russians." He looked up at Lorenzo. "I gave the order myself. Marco and his entire bloodline erased." The floor seemed to tilt under Isabella's feet. "But you just said," Lorenzo's voice was tight. "I said accused." The Don's hand curled into a fist. "We were wrong. 10 years later, we found proof. Marco wasn't the traitor. It was someone else, someone close to me. By then, Marco was dead, his wife dead, his sons dead." His eyes found Isabella's again. "But Lucia, we never found her body. She disappeared the night of the purge." Isabella couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. "She took something with her," the Don continued. "Marco's greatest secret, the thing that made him invaluable. He had a ledger written in Old Sicilian. It contained every blood oath, every alliance, every debt owed across the 5 families for 100 years. Whoever held that ledger held power over everyone." He leaned forward. "Did Lucia give you anything before she died? Papers, a book?" Isabella thought of her grandmother's tiny apartment, the boxes of old photographs and yellowed letters, the cookbook with recipes written in cramped, spidery handwriting. The cookbook. Oh God, the cookbook. Her face must have given her away because Lorenzo moved so fast she didn't see him coming. He crouched in front of her, his hands on the arms of her chair, caging her in. "Where is it?" His voice was urgent. "Isabella, where is it?" I don't know if..." "Think. My apartment, my grandmother's things. There's a cookbook, but it's just recipes. Written in Sicilian." Isabella nodded numbly. Lorenzo was already moving, snapping orders. "Luca, take a team to her address. Don't let anyone see you. Bring me everything." "Boss, if the Russians know who she is..." "They don't. Not yet. The scene at the gala will take time to circulate. We have maybe 6 hours before someone makes the connection." Lorenzo's eyes found Isabella's. "What's your address?" She told him, watched as he relayed it to Luca, who disappeared with 3 other men. Then the Don spoke again, and his voice was thick with something that might have been grief. "If you are Marco's blood," he said to Isabella, "then I owe you a debt that can never be repaid. I killed your family. I destroyed your line." His eyes were wet. "But I can offer you protection, a place in this family, the honor that was stolen from you." Isabella's mind was racing. "I don't want a place in your family. I want to go home." "You can't." Lorenzo's voice was flat. "Not anymore. The moment you spoke in that ballroom, you became a target. If the ledger is real, if it's been hidden for 30 years, every family in the country will want it, and they'll go through you to get it." "Then I'll give it to you. Take it. I don't want it." "It's not that simple." The Don's laugh was bitter. "The ledger is written in a code, Old Sicilian words that have meanings within meanings. Only someone trained in the dialect can read it. Only blood." The implication hung in the air like a noose. "You need me," Isabella whispered. "Yes," Lorenzo said. "We need you. And if I say no, then you'll be dead by sunrise." He said it without inflection, without cruelty, just fact. "Because even if we let you go, the Russians won't. The Italians won't. The Chinese won't. You're a loose end now. And in this world, loose ends get cut." Isabella wanted to scream, to cry, to wake up from this nightmare. But she'd learned a long time ago that tears were wasted on people who didn't care. So instead, she straightened her spine and met Lorenzo's eyes. "If I help you," she said, "I want something in return." The ghost of a smile touched Lorenzo's lips. "You're in no position to negotiate. Neither are you. You need the ledger. You need someone who can read it. Right now, I'm the only option you have." She was surprised by how steady her voice was. "So here's the deal. I help you find the ledger and translate it. In exchange, you protect me. You clear my grandmother's name, and when this is over, you let me go." No, the word was so firm, so absolute that Isabella flinched. Lorenzo leaned in closer, and she could feel the heat of him, smell the cedar and smoke. "You don't get to walk away from this, Isabella. Blood doesn't wash off. You're Marco's granddaughter. That means you're owed a seat at the table, a voice, power. His eyes searched hers. "And whether you like it or not, you're safer in this family than you'll ever be outside it. I don't want power. Everyone wants power. They just call it different things. Safety, freedom, choice." His hand, warm and rough, settled on her knee, and every nerve in her body came alive. "Help us find the ledger. We'll protect you. And after, we'll see." It wasn't a promise. It wasn't even a guarantee, but it was all she had. "Fine," Isabella whispered. The Don smiled. It was a terrible thing, full of teeth and old grief and something that might have been pride. "Welcome to the family, child." Isabella was given a room on the 40th floor of the building. It was beautiful. King-size bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, an ensuite bathroom with marble counters, a view of the city that made her dizzy. There was even a closet full of women's clothing in her size, which raised questions she wasn't ready to ask. A guard was posted outside her door. For her protection, Lorenzo said. It felt like a prison. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the guns, the Don's tears, Lorenzo's black eyes watching her like she was a puzzle he needed to solve. Around 3 a.m, there was a knock on the door. Isabella grabbed a robe from the bathroom and opened it to find Lorenzo standing in the hallway, still in his dress shirt and slacks, though his tie was gone and the top buttons were undone. He looked tired, human. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Can you?" "Not since I was 14. He held up a bottle of wine. "I thought you might want the company." It was a terrible idea, but Isabella opened the door wider and let him in anyway. Lorenzo moved to the window, uncorking the wine with practiced efficiency. He poured 2 glasses and handed one to Isabella. "To survival," he said. They drank in silence. The wine was red and rich and probably cost more than her rent. "Why are you being nice to me?" Isabella asked finally. Lorenzo's laugh was dry. "This is nice. You haven't killed me. By your standards, I'm assuming that's nice." "Fair point." He set down his glass. "You want the truth?" "I don't know, do I? You remind me of someone." His eyes were distant, looking at something she couldn't see. "My mother. She wasn't born into this life. My father married her because he loved her, which was considered weakness. She was quiet, soft. Everyone underestimated her." His jaw tightened. "When I was 12, there was an attempt on my father's life. The assassins came to our home. My mother hid me in a crawl space. Then she walked out into the living room and killed 3 armed men with a kitchen knife." Isabella's breath caught. "She died doing it," Lorenzo continued, his voice empty. "But she saved me and my father. And that's when I learned that the most dangerous people are the ones everyone underestimates." His eyes found hers. "You stepped in front of my father tonight. You didn't know if he'd kill you. You did it anyway. That's not bravery. That's stupidity. No, stupidity would have been staying silent." He took a step closer. "You have steel in you, Isabella. You just don't know it yet." She should have stepped back, put distance between them, but she didn't. "Your father," she said quietly. "He's not well, is he?" Lorenzo's expression shuddered. "No. Dementia. Early stages. Some days he's sharp, other days..." He trailed off. "He's losing himself, losing the empire he built, and there are people who would use that weakness to destroy us. Is that why you need the ledger? To secure your position?" "Partly." Lorenzo's hand came up, and for a heart-stopping moment, Isabella thought he was going to touch her face, but he stopped himself. his fingers curling into a fist. But mostly I need it because if the Russians get it, they'll have leverage over every family in the country. They'll start a war, and a lot of innocent people will die. You're trying to prevent a war? I'm trying to survive one. He stepped back, putting safe distance between them. You should get some rest. Luca will be back with your grandmother's things in a few hours. He was at the door when Isabella spoke again. Lorenzo, he paused, his hand on the doorknob. Thank you, she said, for the wine and for not lying to me. Something flickered across his face, almost a smile. Get some sleep, Isabella. Then he was gone, and she was alone with the view and the wine and the terrifying knowledge that she was in deeper than she'd ever imagined. Luca returned at dawn with 4 boxes of her grandmother's belongings. Isabella sat on the floor of her room, surrounded by the remnants of a life. Old photographs, yellowed letters, a rosary with worn beads, and there, at the bottom of the second box, wrapped in a flour sack, the cookbook. It was older than Isabella had thought. The leather binding was cracked and faded, the pages brown with age. The recipes were written in a careful, slanted hand, some in Italian, some in Sicilian, some in that older dialect that her grandmother had whispered in the dark. She opened it randomly and read, Per fare la pace tra nemici, prendere il pane fatto con le mani dite. Una madre, to make peace between enemies, take bread made with a mother's hands. It seemed innocent, just a recipe, but then she looked closer. The first letter of each line, read vertically, spelled out a name. Her hand started shaking. Lorenzo appeared in the doorway. Luca and the Don behind him. They must have been waiting. Is it there? Lorenzo's voice was tight. Isabella nodded, unable to speak. The Don moved slowly into the room, leaning heavily on his cane. He lowered himself to the floor beside Isabella with a grunt of pain and reached for the cookbook with trembling hands. Madre di Dio, he whispered. It's real. Marco's ledger. How does it work? Lorenzo crouched on Isabella's other side. The recipes are a code. Isabella's finger traced the lines. The ingredients, the measurements, the steps, they all mean something else. You need to know the dialect to understand the double meanings. Can you read it? Lorenzo asked. I think so. My grandmother made me memorize so many words. I didn't understand why. Her throat tightened. She was teaching me the code. Then she knew, the Don said softly. She knew that one day you would need it. Isabella turned the pages, and the truth of her inheritance unfolded like a map. Here were the names of every boss in every family going back generations, their oaths, their betrayals, their debts. And there, on page 47, a recipe for wedding soup. Un matrimonio di sangue e oro, a marriage of blood and gold. The first letters spelled Bratva, Russian. Isabella's blood went cold. There's a section on the Russians. Lorenzo went very still. What does it say? She read slowly, translating as she went. The recipe detailed a marriage alliance between the Moretti family and the Kozlov Bratva arranged 40 years ago. A promise of peace sealed with a union between bloodlines, a union that never happened. My father was supposed to marry Alexei Kozlov's daughter, the Don said, his voice hollow. But she died. Car accident. We thought it was just bad luck. His eyes were haunted. This says it was murder, that Alexei killed his own daughter to break the alliance and start a war. Why would he do that? Isabella whispered. Because war is more profitable than peace. Lorenzo's jaw was granite. And because he's been waiting 40 years for the chance to take over the eastern seaboard, he stood abruptly. This is why they've been circling. They know about the ledger. They know it contains proof of what Alexei did. If we expose this, Luca began, we can't. Not without proof beyond the ledger. Alexei will claim it's a forgery. Lorenzo paced like a caged animal. We need leverage, something he values more than his secrets. The Don's phone rang. In the sudden silence of the room, the sound was like a gunshot. He pulled it from his pocket, looked at the screen, and went pale. It's Alexei, he said. Lorenzo's hand shot out. Don't answer, but the Don was already pressing the button. Pronto, a voice came through the speaker, smooth and accented. Salvatore, how is your beautiful city this morning? What do you want, Alexei? I want what you stole from me. I want Marco's ledger. A pause. And I want the girl who can read it. Isabella's heart stopped. I don't know what you're talking about, the Don said, but his voice shook. Please, you think I don't have eyes? The entire Golden Palace saw her speak the old words. By now, my people have identified her, Lucia Constantino's granddaughter, Marco's blood. Alexei's voice hardened. You have 12 hours to bring her to me, alone, or I start killing your people, one every hour, starting with that nice young priest at St. Anthony's. What's his name? Father Michael? The line went dead. The room exploded into motion. Luca was shouting orders. Men were pulling weapons. The Don was on his feet, moving faster than Isabella had seen him move, yelling about securing the churches, protecting the civilians. But Lorenzo just stood there, staring at the phone, his face carved from ice. Then his eyes found Isabella's, and she saw the decision forming before he said the words. No, she said. No, you can't. It's the only way. You just said he'd kill me. I said I needed leverage. Lorenzo's voice was eerily calm. You're not going alone. I'm coming with you. Boss, that's suicide, Luca said. Then I'll die. Lorenzo's eyes never left Isabella's face. But I won't let him slaughter innocent people because I was too much of a coward to face him. This is insane, Isabella's voice broke. I'm not worth this. I'm nobody. Lorenzo moved so fast she didn't have time to react. His hands cupped her face, forcing her to look at him. You are not nobody, he said, his voice fierce. You are blood, you are family, and I protect what's mine. The possessiveness in his tone should have terrified her. Instead, it made her feel something dangerous, safe. They had 12 hours to plan, 12 hours to prepare for a meeting that would likely end with both of them dead. Isabella spent the time reading the ledger, memorizing names and debts, and secrets that felt like lead weights in her mind. Lorenzo spent it on the phone, calling in favors, positioning people, preparing for war. At hour 8, he came to her room. We need to talk, he said. Isabella looked up from the ledger. About what? About what happens if this goes wrong. We die. I think we've established that. Isabella. He sat beside her on the bed, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. If something happens to me, Luca will get you out. He has orders to take you to a safe house in Canada. New identity, new life. I don't care what you want. I care about keeping you alive. His hand found hers, his fingers rough and warm. Promise me, if I go down, you run. Isabella's eyes burned. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. I've been in your life for less than 24 hours. Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. Because I've spent my entire life watching people die for power, for money, for pride, and I'm tired of it. His thumb brushed over her knuckles. You walked into a room full of predators and showed mercy to an old man who didn't deserve it. You did it knowing you'd be punished, and you did it anyway. His eyes found hers. That's worth protecting. You're worth protecting. Isabella didn't think. She just moved, closing the distance between them, pressing her lips to his. It was a soft kiss, desperate, full of everything she couldn't say. Lorenzo went rigid for half a heartbeat. Then his hand slid into her hair, and he kissed her back with a hunger that stole her breath. When they finally broke apart, both of them were shaking. That was stupid, Lorenzo said roughly. I know. We have to focus. I know. If you keep looking at me like that, I'm going to do something we'll both regret. Isabella's laugh was shaky. Would you regret it? Lorenzo's eyes darkened. No, that's the problem. He stood, putting distance between them, running a hand through his hair. 4 hours, he said. Be ready. Then he was gone, and Isabella was alone with the taste of him on her lips, and the certainty that she was falling for a man who lived in a world of violence, a man who would probably die trying to save her. The meeting was set for the docks. Neutral ground, Alexei had said. No weapons, no guards. They both knew it was a lie. Isabella wore jeans and a sweater, clothes from the mysterious closet that fit her perfectly. Lorenzo had given her a bulletproof vest, which she wore under the sweater. It was heavy and uncomfortable and made her feel like she was preparing for battle, which she supposed she was. The car ride was silent. Lorenzo sat beside her, his hand resting on his thigh, close enough that she could touch it if she wanted. She wanted. but she kept her hands folded in her lap and watched the city slide past. The docks at night were a study in shadows and industrial decay. Shipping containers stacked like building blocks, the smell of salt water and oil, the sound of water lapping against concrete, and men. So many men. They emerged from the shadows like ghosts. Russians with cold eyes and AK-47s. Italians with tailored suits and Berettas. All of them watching, waiting. Lorenzo helped Isabella out of the car. His hand on her elbow was steady. "Stay close," he murmured. Alexei Kozlov waited in the center of a cleared space, flanked by his lieutenants. He was tall and broad, with silver hair and a face like a granite cliff. He wore an expensive overcoat and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Lorenzo," he said, his accent thick. "You've grown since I last saw you. You were, 12, 14? 16, Lorenzo said flatly. "At my mother's funeral." "Ah, yes, a tragedy." Alexei's eyes slid to Isabella. "And this must be the girl, Marco's granddaughter. You're prettier than I expected." Isabella said nothing. Lorenzo had coached her. "Let me talk, don't engage." But Alexei wasn't interested in Lorenzo. He walked toward Isabella, and she felt every one of Lorenzo's men tense. Lorenzo's hand tightened on her arm, a warning. Alexei stopped 3 feet away, studying her face. "You look like him," he said. "Marco, same eyes, same stubborn mouth," he smiled. "I killed him, you know. Personally, it was a pleasure." Rage flared hot in Isabella's chest, but she swallowed it down. "I want the ledger," Alexei continued, "and I want you to translate it for me. Do that and I'll let your new family live." "No," Isabella said. Alexei's eyebrows rose. "No. The ledger stays with the Morettis, and so do I." Lorenzo's hand squeezed her arm. A silent message. "What are you doing?" But Isabella wasn't finished. She switched to Old Sicilian, her voice clear and strong. "Un traditore porta vergogna per 7 generazioni." A traitor brings shame for 70 generations. Alexei's face went red. "You dare! Tu uccidisti tu figlia per potere." You killed your daughter for power. L'uomo sapi. The world knows. Around them, the Russians began to murmur. The Italians shifted, hands moving toward weapons. Alexei's hand shot out and grabbed Isabella's throat. Lorenzo moved like lightning. His fist connected with Alexei's jaw, and the older man went down hard. Then the world exploded into chaos. Gunfire erupted from every direction. Isabella hit the ground, Lorenzo's body covering hers, shielding her. She could hear him shouting orders, could feel the vibration of his voice through his chest pressed against her back. The bulletproof vest saved her life. A bullet meant for her spine hit the Kevlar and knocked the breath from her lungs. But she was alive. Lorenzo pulled her behind a shipping container. Blood was streaming from a cut on his temple. "Are you hit?" he demanded. "No, you." "I'm fine." He handed her a gun. "Do you know how to use this?" "No." Point and squeeze. Don't think about it. The firefight raged around them. Isabella's ears were ringing. The smell of gunpowder was everywhere, acrid and choking. Then she saw him, Alexei, moving through the chaos with a rifle, heading straight for Don Salvatore's position. The old man was pinned down behind a car, surrounded, his guards down. Isabella didn't think. She stood up and screamed, in Old Sicilian, in the voice her grandmother had taught her, the voice of the old matriarchs who commanded armies. "Fear me! Stop!" The word cracked across the docks like a whip, and impossibly, unbelievably, the shooting stopped. Men on both sides froze, looking for the source of the voice. Isabella stepped out from behind the container. Lorenzo tried to grab her, but she shook him off. She walked toward Alexei, who stood with his rifle still raised, confusion written across his face. "You want the ledger?" she called. "Fine, I'll translate it. Here, now, in front of everyone." "Isabella, don't," Lorenzo's voice, but she was already pulling the pages she'd photographed from her pocket. The recipe, the marriage alliance, the proof. And she began to read. She read in Old Sicilian first, then translated to English. She told the story of Alexei killing his own daughter, of breaking a sacred oath, of starting a decades-long war for profit. The Russians listened, the Italians listened, and slowly, Alexei's men began to lower their weapons. Because Isabella wasn't just translating, she was pronouncing judgment. In the old world, in the world of blood oaths and ancestral codes, there was nothing more powerful than a matriarch's voice. And Isabella had just claimed that role. Alexei's face twisted with rage. He raised his rifle, aiming straight at her chest. Lorenzo was already moving, but he was too far away. The shot rang out. But it wasn't Alexei who fired. It was one of his own men, a younger soldier with a sick look on his face. The bullet hit Alexei in the shoulder, spinning him around. "Enough," the young Russian said in heavily accented English. "Enough of your lies, old man." Other Russians nodded, muttered agreement. Alexei fell to his knees, blood pouring from his shoulder, his eyes wide with disbelief. He'd been betrayed by his own. Lorenzo reached Isabella's side, his arm coming around her waist, pulling her back. She was shaking so hard she could barely stand. "It's over," he whispered. "You did it. It's over." The Don appeared, limping but alive, leaning on Luca's arm. He looked at Isabella with something like awe. "You are truly Marco's heir," he said. Isabella couldn't speak. The adrenaline was draining out of her, leaving her hollow and exhausted. Lorenzo turned her to face him. There was blood on his face. His shirt was torn, but he was smiling, actually smiling. "You're insane," he said. "You know that?" "I learned from the best." And then she collapsed. She woke up in a hospital bed, soft sheets and the beep of machines. Lorenzo sat in a chair beside her, his head in his hands, asleep. He looked younger like this, vulnerable. Isabella's movement must have woken him because his eyes snapped open. When he saw her awake, the relief on his face was almost painful. "How long?" she asked, her voice rough. 18 hours. You passed out from shock and exhaustion. The doctor said you'd be fine, but..." He trailed off, reaching for her hand. "You scared me." "I scared you? You're the one who got shot." Grazed, barely counts. His thumb brushed over her knuckles. "The Russians are gone. Alexei's in federal custody. His own people turned him in, and the families are calling for a council. They want to hear the rest of the ledger. That's good, right?" "It's good." Lorenzo's expression turned serious. "They also want to meet you, officially, as Marco's heir." Isabella's stomach dropped. "I don't want..." "I know, but they're going to insist." He paused. "There's tradition, protocol, your blood. That means something." "What does it mean?" Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, and to Isabella's shock, he knelt beside the bed. "It means you have a choice," he said. "You can take your place as a matriarch, claim your seat at the table, use your knowledge of the ledger to broker peace." His eyes held hers. "Or you can walk away. I'll protect you, set you up somewhere safe. You'll never have to see this world again." "What do you want me to choose?" "That's not fair. I know. But I'm asking anyway." Lorenzo's jaw worked. When he spoke, his voice was raw. "I want you to stay. Not because of the ledger, not because of tradition." He took a breath. "Because somewhere between you insulting my father and holding a gun you didn't know how to use, I fell in love with you. And the thought of you disappearing makes me want to burn the world down." Isabella's breath caught. "That's really inconvenient," she whispered. "I know. I'm terrible at this, at feelings, at trust. I know. And your world is violent and dangerous and everything I swore I'd never be part of. I know." His hand tightened on hers. "So tell me to let you go. Tell me you want out and I'll do it. I'll keep you safe and let you live your life." Isabella looked at him. This man who'd kidnapped her, protected her, fought for her. This man who knelt beside her hospital bed like she was something precious. And she thought of her grandmother's voice. A woman's power is in her stillness, but maybe power was also in choosing your own path, even if that path led somewhere terrifying. "I'm staying," she said. Lorenzo's eyes closed. "Isabella, not for you, not yet." She squeezed his hand. "For me, because I'm tired of being invisible, tired of being afraid. You said I had steel in me, and maybe you're right. Maybe it's time I found out." When Lorenzo opened his eyes, they were bright with something that looked like tears. "You're going to be extraordinary," he said. "I'm going to be terrified." "That too." He stood, then leaned down and kissed her forehead. Soft, reverent. "Rest. Tomorrow, everything changes." "Lorenzo?" He paused at the door. "Ask me again," she said. "In a month." When I know who I am in this world, ask me again about us." "And what will you say?" Isabella smiled. "Guess you'll have to wait and find out." 3 months later, the council chamber was built like a cathedral, all dark wood and vaulted ceilings and stained glass windows that cast colored shadows across the floor. Representatives from every family sat around a circular table, and for the first time in history, a woman sat among them. Isabella wore a black dress and her grandmother's rosary. She'd learned the game in the months since the docks. How to speak with quiet authority, how to hold silence like a weapon, how to command a room without raising her voice. She was the keeper of the ledger, the voice of the old ways, and she was terrifying. Lorenzo sat on her right, his hand resting on the table close to hers. He'd been true to his word. He'd asked again a month after the hospital, and she'd said yes. They weren't married, not yet, but there was a ring on her finger that spoke of promises made in darkness, sealed with whispered words neither of them could take back. The Don sat across from him, looking frailer but more at peace. He'd stepped down as head of the family, passing the title to Lorenzo. But he still attended councils, still offered counsel, still looked at Isabella like she was a miracle. "The Chicago family has a dispute with the Boston organization," one of the representatives was saying. "They're asking the council to arbitrate." All eyes turned to Isabella. She opened the ledger, the real one, now kept in a vault and only brought out for councils, and found the relevant page. "Boston owes Chicago a debt from 1987, she said. 2 lives. The debt was never called in, so it still stands." She looked at the Boston representative. "You pay what's owed or you pay in blood, your choice." The man went pale but nodded. This was her power. Not violence, not fear, truth, history, the weight of oaths that couldn't be broken. The council adjourned at midnight. Lorenzo walked her to the car, his hand on the small of her back. "You were magnificent," he said. "I was bossy." "That's what I said." He opened the door for her, but before she could get in, he pulled her close. "Come home with me." "I thought we were going home." "Not the penthouse. Home. The estate in Connecticut. Where it's quiet." His forehead rested against hers. "Where it's just us." Isabella's heart did a stupid flutter. "Okay." They drove in comfortable silence, the city giving way to suburbs, then forests. The estate was a sprawling Italian villa surrounded by gardens and security that would make Fort Knox jealous. But inside, it was warm, lived in, home. Lorenzo made them tea, an absurdly domestic sight, this dangerous man in a kitchen, and they sat by the fireplace, her feet in his lap, talking about nothing and everything. "Do you regret it?" he asked finally. "Staying?" Isabella thought about it, about the life she'd left behind, small and safe and invisible, about the life she had now, dangerous and powerful and terrifyingly real. "No," she said, "I don't regret it, even though you're trapped with me, especially because I'm trapped with you." She smiled. "You're very pretty when you're not threatening people." Lorenzo's laugh was surprised and genuine. "Pretty? Devastatingly so. It's a problem." He pulled her closer, his hands framing her face. "I love you," he said, in case that wasn't clear. It was fairly obvious. Her fingers traced the scar on his temple, the one from the docks. "I love you too, inconveniently. The best kind." When he kissed her, it tasted like promises, like a future written in a dialect only they could speak, like coming home. 5 years later, the girl was 3 years old, with her mother's green eyes and her father's dark hair. She sat on her great-grandfather's lap, listening to him tell stories in Old Sicilian, her face scrunched in concentration. "Di novo," she demanded, again. Don Salvatore laughed, a real laugh, unguarded and warm, and began the story over. Isabella watched from the doorway, Lorenzo's arm around her waist. She was pregnant again, just barely showing, a secret they hadn't shared yet. "She's gonna be a terror," Lorenzo murmured. "She gets it from you." "From me?" "She argued with a judge last week, a federal judge. She's 3. Isabella laughed. "Okay, she gets it from both of us. They'd built something impossible. A family that straddled 2 worlds, old and new, traditional and revolutionary. Isabella had translated the entire ledger, then helped write new codes, new rules. They'd brokered peace between families that had been at war for generations. And they'd done it together. The girl, Lucia, named for her great-great-grandmother, looked up and saw her parents, her face split into a grin. Mama, Papa. She scrambled off the Don's lap and ran to them, wrapping her small arms around Isabella's legs. Lorenzo scooped her up, settling her on his hip with the ease of practice. What did Bisnonno teach you today? A secret, Lucia said seriously. I can't tell. Oh, a secret. That's very important. But Mommy can know. Mommy knows all the secrets. Isabella met Lorenzo's eyes over their daughter's head. He smiled, soft and private, the smile he saved only for her. Yeah, he said. She does. And in that moment, in that warm house full of love and danger and impossible futures, Isabella understood what her grandmother had been preparing her for. Not just survival, legacy. She'd spoken in a dead language and brought it back to life. She'd stood in front of guns and refused to be silent. She'd taken a world built on violence and bent it just a little toward mercy. And she'd taught her daughter to do the same. A woman's power is in her stillness, but sometimes Isabella thought it's also in her voice. So, if this story gave you chills, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We drop new dark romance stories every week that'll keep you up at night. And tell me in the comments, would you have dared to speak to the Don? Would you have stepped into that room knowing it could cost you everything, or would you have stayed invisible? Drop a queen if you're Team Isabella. Drop a run if you think she should have walked away. And if you want to see more stories about powerful women who refuse to be silenced, let me know what you want to hear next. I'll see you in the next video.